Terra's story, chapter 39. Mama looked at Terra with a deep sadness and an exhalation that seemed to empty out her soul. It was a long time ago, my dear. Several of your lifetimes in Earth time and an incarnation for this being that should have cycled several times if he had not chosen the darkness. She looked around the circle. How old is Marius? Christine asked, her eyes wide. 347 cycles around the sun in this dimension. Mama answered. Christine gasped. You knew him before his darkness took over, Mama? Terra asked. Yes, it was a time of great testing and sorrow for him. He sought me out when he was but a boy, Mama continued. His father was an evil man who toyed with the dark, thinking he could improve his circumstances. He was poor and ignorant and resentful of anyone who he thought had more than he did. He'd managed to marry a sweet local girl who felt sorry for him and thought her compassion could help him heal. Mama shook her head in sorrow. It would have if he'd been willing to accept it, but he began to resent even her light. The first time he hit her, he was appalled, but the demon thought forms in his head told him that she lied, that her love was not real, that she mocked him. The more she forgave him, the more unworthy he felt, and the more violent he became. The boy saw this happening and came to me to find help for him and his mother. Already he was twisted with hatred for his father. He stayed 5 days in the cave with me. Terra, you know the one. Terra lifted her face to acknowledge that she remembered it well. I took him into the same magical places I took you. I watched him waver between hatred for his father and love for his mother. In the early hours of the 5th day, before the sun rose, his mother's light came to us. She was moving into a higher plane of existence and sought her son to give him her love before departing. The boy sat by the pool in tears, feeling her tenderness, knowing that the only thing that remained for him in his old home was his father's torment. I saw him reach for his anger to shut down the anguish of his broken heart. He jumped up and ran away without taking anything with him. Mama paused to scrub her hands across her face. I knew what he would find when he got home. His mother's body, her face distorted and discolored in death from his father's hands choking the light out of her. The boy's hatred for his father was almost as great as the father's hatred for himself. So when the boy grabbed a hoe from outside the front door, the father barely lifted a hand to defend himself. The boy's rage consumed him. I could see it. I could feel the energy of it in the ethers. And that simple farm tool became in his hands a lethal weapon. The boy killed his father, but did not stop when life left. He kept chopping with it until his father's body was in bits, and the humble home splattered with blood and bits of flesh. I heard the shout across the ethers. I will never suffer as my mother did. I will never again open my heart to the weakness of love. My hatred will make me stronger than any force in the universe. I call into me every force that will make me stronger, and I will never submit to any power that does not do my will. Mama drew in a long, slow breath, raised her face, and blew, and the story came to life in the mist above their heads. As they watched, the boy began to writhe and twist. He opened his mouth, and terrifying, unearthly screams poured out. His countenance distorted, and he recoiled from the impact as a legion of demons dove into him. When finally he stilled, a cold calm had taken over his features. He looked around at the death and destruction surrounding him. He looked at the body of his mother and spat. Love. Ha! Useless. He kicked the heap of body parts that had been his father, watched as the dismembered head rolled off to the side and spat on it too. Then he turned and walked into the forest. As he disappeared among the trees, the mist Mama had created above them dissipated also. That was several lifetimes ago, Mama continued after a few moments of shocked silence. The boy never finished the cycle. He became the living embodiment of evil, doing whatever he needed to do to continue on this plane. Sacrifices, blood, destroying others to steal their life force. He has had no human emotion since that time. Actually, nothing of being human remains in him, so be wary. He is confused now because he expected his demons to finish his dirty work, but he will soon erase those memories and draw in more aspects of darkness. She stood and looked around her at the faces held rapt by her story. I sequestered the money to keep him bound to this plane of existence until you all could come together, because only together will you have the ability to defeat such darkness. You have done well thus far. How you continue from this point will determine not only the fate of each of you individually, but also the fate of this municipality. What will rule here? The light or the dark? Whatever happens here will bleed over in the dimensions. Mama started toward the door, and Terra came awake. Mama, don't leave. We need you. Mama turned back and looked at her lovingly. I am never far if you need me, daughter, but you now have all the tools you need. You know the story. You know what's at stake. Consider well who you are. She swept her arm around the room to include every person there, and what you know. She turned back toward the door. Just as she passed through, Simeona ran over to give Terra a quick hug and followed Mama out, closing the door gently behind her. The uneasy quiet that followed the closing click of the door was filled with questions, but it took mere seconds for Terra to stand up, her resolve firmly in place. Okay, so now we know what the triggering event was that started this monster. She took a deep breath. On this path, but we still need to stop him. Clearly, keeping him incarcerated isn't doing it. Mama said we have everything we need, so let's inventory again, actually make a list, and see if we can't create a strategy. Most certainly we can, insisted Christine, as Joni and Brian gathered around Cap. Terra walked over to join them and knelt in front of her boss, friend, and mentor. Her eyes searched his face while her spidey senses felt into his consciousness. He gazed at her with still a bit of confusion, but smiled back. Terra saw the dark mass of energy curled around the back of his skull and noted the clench of her stomach and the hint of nausea as she allowed herself to acknowledge its presence. May I, Cap? She asked as she stood up, her hand poised. Cap shrugged, unsure what she was about to do, but trusting her. Sure. Terra stepped beside him and reached her right hand into his field, feeling the change in texture and intent as her hand reached the energetic mass. She grabbed it and started to pull. Cap jerked and looked up at her, frowning. As she pulled, the mass changed shape, still clinging to the base of his skull and the back of his neck. It had also reached tentacles down into his shoulders. She reached in with her left hand, too, and began to extract the darkness, hand over hand. Seeing the struggle, Brian and Joni joined her. Brian began to snap his fingers in a quick rhythm, which seemed to distract the mass from Terra's attempt to dislodge it. Joni began to sing a Sanskrit chant, which immediately made the mass go weak. Now Terra could grab big chunks of it, hand over fist, and as its elasticity turned rigid, she could break it off and throw it to the floor. Anita ran over and held her palms so that chi flowed forth, scattering the fragments of darkness and sweeping them away. When Terra had removed all but a tiny dark seed, she felt a pop, as though some kind of suction released, and she almost fell backward, dancing a couple of steps until she regained her balance. Cap had felt it too, and now shook his neck and shoulders in some kind of reflexive response. Everyone in the room could feel a distinct lightness, especially after Anita leaned over and blew hard to clear the seed, the last remnants of the dark mass, then clapped her hands together to seal the energetic portal. Cap sat up and looked around as though he were just now awakening, more alert and brighter than he had been in days. Wow, that sure made a difference, Terra. He looked at Jameson, sitting on one side, and then at the mayor, sitting on the other. Terra quickly scanned with her inner gaze and nodded. Yes, they have a dark mass, too. She gestured for Joe and Jeff to come closer. You saw how to do this. Clear everyone, these folks and those in the other security pods. Then bring everybody back in here. We're going to make this salon a sanctuary that these dark energies can't penetrate. That will give our people time to come fully back and will also give us a place to refresh our energies. Christine, you can do this too. Me? But, Christine hesitated. Yes, you can do it too. Anybody can. Just trust what you see with, well, the eyes behind your eyes. Everyone has non-physical vision. You just have to accept what you see and learn to interpret it. Then, use your intention to do what needs to be done. And yes, Terra stopped to make sure everyone was listening. Your physical movements affect the energies. They mirror your intention. Thought always precedes form, then creates reality. You'll see the unconscious reactions that confirm the effect you're having. She glanced outside to see blue deepening the sky, then turned to double-check the time on the big grandfather clock behind her. Breakfast will be here soon. Let's take a break. Marius is weakened enough that we should have some time before another attack, but keep all your senses tuned and listen for guidance. We're not going to wait while he builds up strength, so we need to be thinking about how to diffuse this whole situation. See you back here in a little while.